So, I mean, swimming, soccer, and hockey are not your highest flexibility sports. So I'm sitting out there with the 90-degree splits, right? And trying to touch my toes and just struggling so mightily. It was crazy. And there was like, I'm sitting here going, what am I doing? I am 35 years old or whatever I was at the time. And my kids loved it. That's my dad. That's my dad. That's my dad. So it was cool. And so at the time, I didn't realize how much of an impact it would have on my life and my kids' life. Not just the lessons that we learn in the martial arts, because we talk about those all the time, the respect, the discipline, the confidence, all those things that we develop within the martial arts. That's awesome. And it's all part of the curriculum. But the bond between your kids and your parents, there are very, very few things in life that we are on par with our kids, where we are both sitting here going, front snap kick, chamber kick, rechamber. Okay, got it. Dad, you're not rechambering your foot. You're pointing, no, you're not pointing your toes. You're not. And it's like, you're right, shut up. It's like they call you out and they're like, Dad, that's not how we do basic form number 1. Come on. And it's like, but we're all learning the same thing. And there's nowhere else that I can think of that you had that same level playing field. A white belt son, daughter is the same as a white belt dad.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Conversations from the Hearth. Today, we are joined by Master David Popper of Martial Arts Institute North in Overland Park, Kansas. Master Popper, great to have you on the show.
Welcome to the show.
Oh, man, so nice to be here. I'm really excited. This is going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm really excited to learn more about your history in the martial arts, how you get started. We were talking briefly about how you got started a little bit later in life and how that's, it's not untypical in the martial arts. That's how most people start, actually. But it's a little untypical for a master instructor who has his own school. And that's actually a really unique perspective to have and something that we can share with the students. But before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about your martial arts journey up until this point, how you got started, and how you've sort of evolved to have a martial arts school?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So the first things first, I was a traditional athlete. I did soccer, I played hockey, I was a swimmer, did that all the way through high school. I played hockey into my 30s in Chicago. So I've always been athletic, and I've always seen, my friends back in the 80s when I was in high school. That was the time of the Karate Kid and all that stuff. So we saw some of our friends going, I'm doing karate. I'm going to be the next Karate Kid guy. And they lasted all of a week or two because the training back then was way different than it is now. They didn't really care too much about whether you didn't feel great or, the training methodology was just way different. And I think you can both attest to that. But for whatever reason, they dropped out. Nobody ever really did it. It was just kind of one of those fringe things that people did. And, but I've always been intrigued, Enter the Dragon, Bruce Lee. I mean, that was the movie back in the day, Bloodsport and you're thinking, oh man, these guys are so good. And so what's interesting about those movies though, is they set an unrealistic expectation. Daniel-san gets a black belt in what? 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is. And then wins a tournament. Having been a tournament competitor, I'm sorry, Daniel-san would have not done so great. But anyway.
Yeah, that bothers me to no end. I always see that in movies. It drives me crazy.
It's a great show. I mean, interesting little sidetrack. I had a kid call up and say, yes, I am looking for advanced training. I'm 16, 15, whatever, and I want to train a fast style of martial arts like Cobra Kai. And I'm like, oh no, He's like, yeah, I want to be able to beat up my bullies. I'm like, dude, somebody in town's going to take your money and they're going to tell you they can do it. They're just going to get you hurt. You need to look at martial arts in a whole different way. But anyway, kind of got sideways. But so I started, I played hockey when I was in Chicago, moved to Kansas City, and there's no hockey here. So I'm like, what am I going to do? Tried golf. That was a lot of fun, but you know, a hockey swing and a golf swing are very different. So I had my golf balls took a hard ride a lot. So it was a little frustrating. But anyway, I showed up near our house. There was a strip mall with your, you know, Taekwondo on it, and my kids wanted to do some martial arts. And I'm like, you know what, guys, if that's what you want to do, let's do it. And so I went into the school, talked to the school owner or whoever it was, and signed my two of my kids up for martial arts lessons. And so the first day I showed up there, I'm sitting in the parents area figuring, I'll see what they're doing, right? And I'm watching them do this stuff and I'm like, oh, that looks so cool. That looks like so much fun. And the master instructor at the time, he was part of the Korean Tigers demo team. That was kind of his history. So he was very fundamental and very technical on everything. Pick your knee up, pick your foot up, extend, rechamber. All of that was just, he was really into that. So yeah, I'm sitting here watching my kids doing this, and he came over at the end of class and he says, you know, you look like you were enjoying watching. I said, oh yeah, it was really cool. That looks like a lot of fun. He's like, would you rather sit there for an hour or would you rather train with your kids? And I'm like, wait a minute, that's an option? And he's like, yeah, we have a family class. If you want to come train with us, you know, you can do it with your kids. And I'm thinking, you know, the dad in me is like, oh, yeah, I don't want to embarrass myself in front of my kids. You know, it's like, this is a bad idea. This is a bad idea. But I was thirsting for something to do after my hockey that could have been competitive. Yeah. And I was just dying for something. I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'll try it. Can I just try it? And he's like, sure, yeah, no problem. Come to the next class. It's at 6:15 or whatever. And I jumped in there. And the next day I was so sore. Oh my God. I thought I was gonna die. And I was an athlete. I mean, it wasn't like I was not an athlete, but it was a totally different way of training. And so, I mean, swimming, soccer, and hockey are not your highest flexibility sports. So I'm sitting out there with the 90-degree splits, right? And trying to touch my toes and just struggling so mightily. It was crazy. And there was like, I'm sitting here going, what am I doing? I am 35 years old or whatever I was at the time. And it was, my kids loved it. That's my dad. That's my dad. That's my dad. So it was cool. And so at the time, I didn't realize how much of an impact it would have on my life and my kids' life. Not just the lessons that we learn in the martial arts, because we talk about those all the time, the respect, the discipline, the confidence, all those things that we develop within the martial arts. That's awesome. And it's all part of the curriculum. But the bond between your kids and your parents, there are very, very few things in life that we are on par with our kids, where we are both sitting here going, front snap kick, chamber kick, rechamber. Okay, got it. Dad, you're not rechambering your foot. You're pointing, no, you're not pointing your toes. You're not. And it's like, you're right, shut up. You know, it's like they call you out and they're like, Dad, that's not how we do basic form number 1. Come on. And it's like, but we're all learning the same thing. And there's nowhere else that I can think of that you have that same level playing field. A white belt son, daughter is the same as a white belt dad. And as long as you maintain rank, you guys are exactly the same all the way through. And I mean, I can remember going through my journey and I had the kids in the living room. We'd clear out the living room furniture and we'd all take turns and we'd take turns being judges. Okay, I'm here. All right, I'm watching. You do it right. And we're like, they're all 1, 2, doing their thing. I'm like, oh, no, you messed this up. And then I'm up there and I'm doing my thing and like, Dad, really? And I'm like, what? Oh, more power. And I'm like, come on. It was just so cool. And you can't buy those experiences. You really can't. It just was so amazing. Because we always had something to talk about. I said 2 kids. I'm a blended family. I've got 6. I had 3, my wife had 3, we have 6. My wife started up, 2 more of my kids started up. We had 4 of the 6 in martial arts along with my wife. And it was just, to this day, we still talk about it. 2 of my kids, one of my daughters, one of my sons got their black belt. The rest kind of fizzled off into the sunset, but it's just something that we'll always have. That's something that it's a common experience that nobody else can experience unless they do it. It's just really neat.
You sold me on it. That was a great story. Wow. And you told it so well. Like you really, I was getting emotional just hearing it.
Well, it's fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's interesting. And it's funny because when I first started, I didn't want to test. I'm like, look, I'm 35 years old. I don't need a black belt. I don't even need a yellow belt. Just give me a white belt. I'll just do my thing. I didn't realize curriculum was tied to belts. So after about 6 weeks of doing single middle punch, double punch, triple punch, front snap kick, roundhouse, axe kick, and basic form number 1, I'm going, Cal test. So then that started off a whole new direction. Plus, I wanted to keep up with my kids because at that point it was now competitive. When they started calling me out, sorry, kids, Dad's an athlete, Dad's competitive. You're about to find out how competitive.
Well, I think your kids bossing you around is a good incentive to try harder and get ranked up. You don't want them to be your senior.
Yeah, no, it was a funny story on that. So my wife stopped at black belt. She got her first degree and that was the end of that. And when I got my 4th, she's like, okay, here's the deal. At the school, you're Master Dave. At home, check that belt at the door, pal. You're mine. I'm like, okay, honey, you're right.
I think that's how it always goes.
I know. It's so funny. Everybody's like, oh, Master Dave. And then I get home, it's like, take out the trash. And you're like,
oh. Yeah. Someone's got to keep us level-headed, keep it real.
Sponsored by Monster. All right. So trying to get you a sponsor there. All right.
There we go. They got to pay us money. No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
Yeah, so I remember I trained with my dad. It was kind of an interesting experience because we were already black belts, me and my brother. We were 1st or 2nd degree black belts at the time, and he started after us. Thinking about your story, man, my dad was such a brave guy to come in there as a white belt, with his kids who were, more advanced than him. But I'm really proud of him, and it was a ton of fun. I wouldn't trade it for the world, especially for my father, because he was a very busy guy. He would leave the house at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. He'd get home at 10:30 at night. I never really saw him. He traveled around the world a lot. And so I wouldn't see him for 2 months at a time. But then he eventually stopped doing a lot of the traveling and he said, why don't I jump in with you? And it was great because for the first time in my life, I got to really see my dad a lot. And it was cool. And I have one funny story. Maybe you have stories like this, but because of that, the sort of discrepancy in rank, a lot of times I was like running the class, I'm like 12 years old and I'm like lining people up. And, I lined my dad up, and he would get like, you could tell he wasn't angry about it, but it was like, this is a little weird for him. And we were doing kicking pads. We were doing the big heavy shield, spinning back kick or skip side kick. I can't remember. And I held for my dad, and my dad skip side kicked me so hard that I flew all the way across the gym, hit the back door, fell out in the street. And my Master Quad was like, Dr. Rolls, you can't be kicking your son like that, But That's what happens when, you know, we have families train together sometimes, I guess.
Well, it's funny you say that because there comes a point too where you start thinking, you know what, I'm not going to kick so hard. You know, my kid's holding the pad. I'm not going to knock him through the next week, right? and they'll call you up. They'll say, "Really, Dad? That's all you got today?" And I'm like, huh, "Okay." And so we call it the square game. We'd see how far we could move each other off the square. So, you know, my record was 5. So I had to do that kick. I got my daughter 5 squares back. But she wanted me, and she got up. She's like, "I was awesome." You know, it's like, you know, anybody hearing this might be, you kicked your kid 5 squares? That's awful. No, you know what? It's the martial arts. She wanted it. She said, "Kick me, Dad, and see if you can move me." And she was ready, and I did it. And we both got up and high five. You know, it's like that big hit in football. You know, you take out the receiver, everybody's fine, nobody's hurt, pick them up, dust them off, high five, move on, next play, good job. You know, and that's something that, again, I might be getting a little off here, but I think we treat our kids like they're too fragile. They are so much capable of so much more. I'm not a proponent of hard training and to the point of injury. When we spar, we wear gear. I mean, there's no question about that. But playing tag is not part of martial arts. You got to make that pad pop. It's not at my school. You know, tournaments and things, that's a different story, but it's not real unless I hear it. You know, if I don't hear the hit, you didn't score a point. I always joke, I'll score points with my ears, not with my eyes. You know, I want to see contact, but you can't protect people from that because it is part of what we do. And if we do our job, they're prepared for that. They're prepared to be hit, and they're prepared to hit correctly. We're not aiming for the groin. I don't know if you're a groin kick school. We're not. You know, we're aiming for the hogu. When we do contact to the head, you touch the headpiece. You don't. I don't want anybody looking out the ear hole. You know, we touch the headpiece. And if people aren't ready for that, if they don't have that kind of control, they spar with our higher belts. We give our higher belts a little different strategy. Look, you're sparring a white belt that had 8 classes. You know, spar appropriately. Work on your footwork. Work on your movement. Work on your timing. Try to, as soon as their foot hits the floor, counter. All the little things that you can do with a white belt without scaring them or hurting them or anything like that. You know, that's you know, we'll work with that. And that's another thing that I think, and again, I don't know how your school operates, but we do weekly curriculum. So, you know, the whole week we'll do sparring, the whole week we'll do self-defense, the whole week we'll do kicking, the whole week we'll do hand techniques, the whole week we'll do basics. So for 6 weeks, we have a 6-week curriculum where we're just doing one thing. So no matter what day you show up, you're getting the whole curriculum. So if you show up on sparring week and that's your first day of class, guess what you're doing that day? Now you're going to spar with me and I'm not going to hurt you. And we're going to bounce around and you're going to leave that class going, that was so much fun, right? And they're not afraid of it. It's funny because I went through different stages in my school where people were afraid of sparring because we didn't do enough of it. And so when it did happen, they're like, oh, it's sparring. And now it's like, I could come out here and say, hey guys, we're sparring today. And 25 students are going, oh, yeah, because we didn't hide it from them. We didn't make it scary. We didn't keep it from them. We just let them run. And, you know, back to the family martial arts, that is one thing I won't let my families do. I won't let my brothers and sisters spar with each other.
Yeah, always.
I won't let mom and dad spar with their kids, at least, especially any lower belts. But yeah, that's I don't hide the sparring from my students. I just think it's so important because that contact is important.
I think we're kindred spirits in that. I mean, the way you run your school sounds just like the way I run my school. And it's a balance, you know, obviously between trying to keep people safe, but also trying to lift them up and build them up, and I do agree in our current world, sometimes people don't realize that enough, you have some parents that come and say, I'll never say no to my kids. I'm like, we'll see how that goes. We'll see how that goes. It's like
years. Let's see how that works out. Yeah.
Like you need to set boundaries, and you need to, push kids and take them out of their comfort zone. If I have parents come in and say, you can just tell the instructor, if you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to do this. It's like, no, that's not going to work. Like that's going to perpetuate his predicament. It's just going to make it worse. So
yeah, I always respond to that with, you can say it all you want, we're still going to train. It's like my mom says I don't have to do 10 push-ups. Okay, you can do 15 then. What? Yeah. Hey, it's not 10. So no, I'm not mean that way, but yeah, I like to challenge my kids mentally too. You're talking to them and you're saying, okay, we'll do plank and we'll hold plank, and about 30 seconds in, I'll start counting down from 10. And it'll take me about a minute and a half to get to 0. To get the bottle, it's like I get to 5 and I'll go 6. No, you're going the wrong way. Like they're like, no, that's the wrong way. Okay, let's start over then. 10. And they're like, no, we already got the 7. Okay, 8. And but the whole time they're trying to correct me, they don't realize they just did plank for a minute and a half.
Yeah, sir.
And if I was dead silent and just stood there, they'll give up at anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute, and their knees are down and their butts are in the air and all that stuff's happening. Sometimes you have to trick people to being their best self, and we distract them a little bit, and they can go a little bit further. And then I get down to 5 seconds. Anybody can do anything for 5 seconds, and then 5 seconds is about 20. So they're all, just 5 more seconds, and they can do it. So, but
I heard some study. I don't know if it's true. It came from my feed or something. Someone was passing this on, but like they did some study with mice, and they put them in water and just let them try to swim. And within like 15 minutes, they just gave up and drowned. But then they put mice in the water, and right before 15 minutes, they picked the mouse up, pulled them out, tried them off, put them back in. And then they swam for 60 hours.
Yeah, because they had hope that somebody would save them, right?
Yeah. And so it's like, kind of like what's going on there. The last lap is always the hardest. And if you set yourself a goal, like, it can easily seem overwhelming. Like if you told the kids, hey, you're going to hold plank for a minute and a half, they're probably like, no way, we can't do that. And they like give up on themselves. But by saying we're going to for 10 seconds, but 10 seconds becomes a minute and a half. It's almost like playing games with their mind to help them improve.
Oh yeah, and we do that with push-ups too. Like you start counting out push-ups. Okay, let's do some push-ups, and you count 1, and they're quiet. 1, sir. Yeah, 1. 1, sir. 1, sir. Okay, that's 3. Not only do you have them answering better, but you just got 3 push-ups out of them before they even really realized they even started. So, it's the same concept. Just trying to get people want to be more than they came in as. Otherwise, they wouldn't be coming in. They want to be better than they were when they walked in the door, and they can't be better than they were when they walked in the door if they keep doing the same things over and over. So you've already established a perfect example. I'll just use me as an example. Competition. At the first school I went to, there was no competition. We did not do tournaments. We sparred once a month, maybe. And during that progression, we would have we'd have sparring class, and as I was a higher level student, I was like, yeah, I'll run this ring, and I'd go over and I'd run it instead of actually sparring, because then I didn't have to, right? And it's one of the reasons why I kind of went the opposite when I had my own school, because I just realized after I got good at it how important it was to the overall curriculum. But so we'd have
Are
this.
sorry, not to interrupt. Are you talking about how sometimes when people gain rank, they kind of step out of sparring?
Well, they hide because they don't
Yeah, they-
feel like they have to, or they're afraid of either embarrassing themselves
Yes,
or embarrassing the person in front of them.
yeah,
9 times out of 10, the people that are good at sparring have zero problem getting in the ring with anybody.
yeah,
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who's in there. The ones that are anxious and nervous about it are going to think of every reason in the world why they shouldn't. My knee's a little sore today. I didn't stretch out good. I was a little late to class. My uniform smells. I don't want anybody close. I don't want to share gear. I don't want to I mean, you name it. Or you know what? There's a lot of low belts. Let's get them some matches. I'll run the ring for you.
yeah.
You know, they're in their mind, they're not making excuses so much as they're trying to be helpful without having to do what, I mean,
Yeah.
they are thinking through it. They're
Yeah.
just not accepting the fact that they're looking for reasons not to, not reasons to.
Yeah,
And I think that's super important, especially for adults. I'm talking to all the adults out there.
yeah,
Guys, when I started, I was an adult in martial arts. I didn't have the 4 to 20 age range of competing at tournaments and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. I loved training. I didn't love sparring because I just didn't do it. And I found all the reasons not to. Now, flash forward, I opened my school. I got kids that want to compete. I start training sparring with them because I knew how to train it. I just didn't do it much. And then I jumped in and when you're a new school owner, you got like 7 students and you do it with them. So I started bouncing and moving and applying the drills that I'd been teaching for a few years at that point. And I'm like, this is so much fun. What the hell? What was I thinking? This is so much fun. And so we'd go to a tournament and there'd be adults there, black belt adults wanting to compete. I'm like, you know what? Sign me up. I'm gonna put myself out there. And so I started sparring at tournaments, and I did okay at the beginning, but after a couple of years of doing it, I mean, I started fighting on the karate circuits. I started competing all over the country. Did the IMAC championships in Vegas. I did Battle of Atlanta, Diamond Nationals. I mean, I competed all over. It was so much fun. And not just in our style of Taekwondo, but in point, because in Kansas City, there's not a ton of Olympic style tournaments. So I was looking for more tournaments just so I could compete. And then all my students wanted to come because Master Dave's competing, let's go.
yeah,
And it just became such a part of my life. And then as a result, it became a part of my school.
yeah,
And it was just really neat because I finally had the autonomy to say, you know what, this is my school. I can run it how I want. And if my students want this, I'm the master instructor. I should be providing what my students want. And if I'm going to go out there and tell them how this is supposed to go and that they need to be careful of this and careful of that, and you need to train this way, and then I go out there and I do the exact same thing I'm teaching them, it was a real powerful connection. And we had a really good competition team for a number of years. It was probably the most fun I had as a school owner. It was just loading people up in the van, driving to wherever, and doing the tournaments.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
That's
the flip side to that too, though, is every once in a while you'll have the people that want to be part of it until they realize what it is, and then they're part of it, and then they're like, yeah, I don't want to do it anymore, but I can't not do it because I've already said I was going to do it. And so you had that conflict in their head, and those people, they end up going to the tournaments and then not doing so well because they're not all in, and then stepping out and saying, you know, this is not for me. Well, that's not totally true. What happens is each martial arts journey is totally in and of your own. You can do whatever you want to do. If you want to compete, go compete. Don't be worried because when I was competing, I was 45 years old, 45 to 51. That's when I competed. So, and granted, it was the old guy division, but hey, I was still out there banging with people. And some of the tournaments, there was nobody for me to spar because, well, I was 45 years old. So I'd jump in with the young guys in exhibition match. And, you know, that was blast. You know, they're faster, stronger, more flexible, but you know, old age and treachery does have its advantages. So, you know, I hung with them. I got beat a few times, but you know, it was fun. It was a challenge.
Yeah,
So
that's awesome. You
Yes,
know, to go rewind quite a ways, you know, you're talking about how people start stepping off the mat once they gain some rank. And
Yeah.
I've seen that happen all the time, like throughout my whole life teaching and training and stuff. I call it the black belt complex. It's like once you get a black belt and you feel like you have some skill and some cred, you become worried about exhibiting that skill, like putting it out there and letting yourself be challenged. And so it's always something I try to remind all of my students, especially my black belt students, is like, this is going to happen as you get more senior in rank. You're going to want to try to withdraw from sparring and from putting yourself out there, and you have to try to force yourself to do the opposite, because it's only within that crucible of challenge that we rise above, that we become better. So I totally agree with that. And then to kind of
in your school, what rank do they achieve where they no longer have to key up?
never.
I know, it's like I'm the loudest one in the school every time, and it's like I'm the highest rank in the school.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So why do I have to key up and you guys don't?
Yeah.
And well, we just feel fine. Since when? You've been key upping since white belt. Why? Well, I want the other people to be able to be loud. I said, dude, we train, we do push-ups, we do sit-ups to train our body to be stronger, to be able to do what we do. We train our voice to be a powerful tool as well.
Yeah.
You know, if you singers, they sit there and they do their warm-up vocal exercises every time before they step up on the stage. You know, they train their voice so that it's powerful and they can project. Opera singers, my God, they've trained years to be able to hit that pitch and that timbre that they belt out, and they can perform in an auditorium without mics. I mean, they're just belting it out and people in the back can hear them.
Mhm.
We're in here and I can't hear the back row.
Mhm.
yes, sir.
I said, what if you needed help? What if you were in a bad situation? You needed some help. Yeah, well. No, you got to train your voice so you can project help. You know, all of a sudden, that's a whole different world. People are going to pop. And whenever I do that, we run an after school program here. So whenever I'm having that talk and I do that loud key up, everybody in the after school area looks over. I mean, it's like I'm loud, they all look. And I said, everybody over there, look. If you're in a public situation and you're trying to get some help and you're loud, everybody's going to look. They're going to see a kid having a problem or an adult having a problem. They're going to run over.
Mhm.
I mean, we don't key up because we want you to make noise. We don't key up because
Yeah.
it's a karate or taekwondo or whatever thing. We key up for a reason. We're training our voice. We're
Building our confidence.
affecting our breathing. We're when you exhale out, you have to breathe in. You know, we're focusing our mind and our body into our power. We're doing all those things with our key ups, but yet people sometimes just can't get past the idea of, oh, I don't want to look silly. No, it's part of the training. It's part of the game. You have to do it. And there's no belt that you're going to get to where it's no longer important.
Yeah, I mean, I tell my students all the time, the reason why we say yes, sir, the reason why we key up as loud as we can is because we're building our confidence, you know. And if you're a really high rank, then you should have more confidence than the low rank. And if no one else key ups and you key up, and if no one else says yes, sir, and you say yes, sir, that shows me you have even more confidence than than you would if everyone else was saying it. So it's a really important training tool, and it's part of their training. You can't get away from not doing those things.
No, you can't. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
When you ran your school, were you always in the school or did you have a side job?
I was always in the school because I started my first program when I was still in school.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for me, I was working. When I was training, I was working. So I went out and, you know, I'd meet clients. The first time it happened, I was mortified. I went up, I put my hand out and I went like this. I'm like, I just freaking bowed to my client. Are you kidding me? But it was so ingrained. Or I do two hands, or I put my hand under my elbow, right? And it was how I showed respect in the dojang. And so it was part of my life. And it was, at first it was embarrassing because I'm like, who bows in the business world? But then I'm sitting here thinking, you know what? This client, they're going to think of me different.
Yeah.
Simply because I acted different, simply because I showed a great deal of respect to them. And, you know, we ran our business for 20 years, 25 years before I started my business and or my martial arts business. And, you know, during that time, I used a lot of what I learned of, you know, sticking to things and looking past problems and moving through and just really working hard in my training, in my life. And, you know, to all the parents that might be listening to this, that this is a life skill that you have that can be honed through training, and you will find a better version of yourself by training with your kids or just training on your own. I've got several adults that started with their kids are no longer here, and they've continued. One of them just got their black belt. I was so proud of him because he's like, oh, my kid doesn't want to do it. I think I'm gonna just stop. I'm like, why? Julio, you're doing a great job. Why would you quit? He's like, well, yeah, good point. And so, you know, you present somebody a black belt that had issues getting there, and it just means so much more.
Yeah.
So much more.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And like, you know, I try to tell my senior students a lot of times as well that I'm a spiritual person, and I kind of see martial arts as kind of spiritual in a way. And when I talk about leadership roles within the martial arts, I say, you know, you don't have to be a martial arts instructor to live the martial way. You know, we are all living that. And in fact, you know, if we kind of liken the martial art dojo to like a church or something, you know, not everyone has to be the priest. You know, the people who are coming to the congregation, who are learning those leadership life skills, those moral life skills, they're just as important as the priest, you know. And so I think we sometimes forget, like, you know, well, I'm only a yellow belt, or I'm only a green belt. I'm not as important. I'm not a senior up. I'm not an instructor here at the school. No, you're just as important, and you need to take on that leadership role just as intimately as anyone else, because you are just as important.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. And I mean, that applies to all aspects of life. I mean, you've got your hourly wage workers, you got your salary managers, you got your owners and forward thinkers for companies that are looking towards different things. Everybody plays a role. And if everybody does what they're supposed to do, then yeah, you built a community. And when people look towards other belts, like for me, one of the biggest eye-opening experiences when I was training as a color belt was when I'd have a 14, 15, 16, 17-year-old in front of the class, and I'm 3 times their age, and they're teaching me something. You know, that was powerful. That was like, this kid knows his stuff. Good for him. You know, and you know, at some point, it's like, you know, I want to be able to do that. I want to be like an 18-year-old or 15-year-old kid. Yeah, I do. I want to have that confidence. I want to have that knowledge. I want to have that ability. And you can admire people for who they are and what they do. You don't have to hold age as the end all be all. You don't even have to hold rank. I had a kid when I first started. He was an orange belt. And I'm sitting here watching this kid. He was just a natural athlete, really flexible, young guy. And I mean, his axe kicks, his foot was straight up and boom. And I'm like, I want to do that. I want to be that guy. He was an orange belt. Another fun story. I used Samjang, killed me. It was the hardest form for me to learn because the first 3 Taeguk forms are so similar in so many ways. They're just slight little tweaks. And I just could not get it through my head that down block punch, kick, down block. It was like watching a baby calf try to walk for the first time. It was a mess. And I'm not kidding. I wanted to quit so bad. So bad. I'm like, this is not working. I can't. If this is the future of my Taekwondo, no, Samjang is going to eat me alive. But I was watching other students, and Peo Ojang was my form. I wanted to know what belt I had to be to learn that form, because that at the end, I'm just like, yes, I want to learn that. And that got me through Samjang, Sajang. And then I got to learn Ojang. I'm like, and now I was hooked. I was totally hooked. And that was it. And to this day, Peo Ojang is my favorite form. Just as you didn't ask, but I told you.
No.
So
It's great.
It's funny how you just find those little things to grab onto. I wanted an axe kick like an orange belt. I wanted a purple belt. I wanted to learn Ojang. It just you find those little things to get you to the next part.
Yeah.
And it's like that in having lived to the point where I was a kid. I went to college. I went to business world. I got married. I had kids. My kids are out of the house. I have grandkids. I'm a business owner. So having gone through that whole gamut of pretty much life, right? I can tell you every stage of life is exactly the same. You just have a different set of problems that you have to get through. It's no magical key or anything. You just you take what you got in front of you and you make the most of it, and then you move on to the next stage. And the however many belts you have from white to black, each one of those is just another stage. You learn what you need to learn, you move on. Okay, you keep what you learned and you move on. You keep what you learned, you move on, and you just build it up. And the next thing you know, you're like, I did it. Question for you though, Master Olds.
Yeah.
When you got the black belt, when you were starting, did you have a warped sense of what a black belt could do and be? Or were you? So for me, I grew up thinking I'm going to hit black belt. I'm going to be Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, and Jean-Claude Van Damme, belt all wrapped into one. And as I got closer and closer, I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. Right?
Yeah.
Did you experience the same thing?
I didn't quite think that I was going to be all that, but I definitely see a lot of people that think that way. My master always taught me that your black belt is just the first step. It just means you're a competitor. You can go out and compete. It doesn't mean you're an expert. And so I think because he told me that, he kind of reframed it in my mind that it wasn't like I have to be always amazing. But yeah, I think that is also so.
But you also did it when you were younger, though, right? You got
and I was also younger. Yeah, for sure.
I went through my whole adult life thinking black belts were these ninja dudes that you couldn't even touch, right?
Yeah.
So again, kind of a difference of my experience versus yours. You reframe, you set in your head, not being a part of the industry, what your vision of a black belt is. And as I got closer and closer and closer, I'm like, I'm a red belt. When am I going to learn this ninja stuff? When am I going to learn? And then I'm sitting here, you're testing for your black belt in 3 weeks. And you're like, I'm not a ninja. I don't know. It's like you just set those expectations. But the thing that was really cool about it is once I realized that wasn't what a black belt was. Once I realized that the black belt is the beginner's curriculum. You've learned the basics. You've learned how to punch, how to kick, how to do your forms, how to spar, maybe some self-defense. And then once you hit black belt, now you start living it all. You start understanding how to put combinations in and what the goals are. One of my favorite drills in the world is taking a pumse form and saying, okay, what are we doing here? And, like Chiljong, where you take and you do this, right? And then knee, uppercut, right? So what are we doing? Oh, we're grabbing. I said, okay, grab me. And as soon as they go to grab me, I go like this. I said, what did I do? I said, oh, you blocked. Yeah. Because if somebody grabs you, what are they going to do? They're going to knock your hands away. So, and almost everything that we do is a reaction to something somebody else does. So you're not just grabbing your opponent, you're reacting to their grab, you're breaking it, knee strike, all that stuff, and continuing on. And it's like, and you know, you ask, I'm sure you've asked, how many forms do we start with an attack? 0. We don't attack from the beginning. So, and every move has multiple moves within it that could be used for different ways. And that to me was just mind blowing as I continued to work with the forms. And the longer I worked with them and the more I knew them and understood movement, small circle, self-defense stuff where, oh, you know what? I could come here. This could be a break, you know, breaking a grab, right? Not just a back fist. It could be, you know, removing a grab. It just, that was so much fun. And when we do black belt classes, we always break down a form, say, come up with another reason for why we would do that.
Well, you know, yeah. And, you know, it's also, I think this idea of, you know, you thought a black belt was going to mean that when you get your black belt, you're this amazing ninja or something like that. But then you felt when you got your black belt, you weren't. Also shows you humility and that you understood the central principle of the martial arts, which you need to learn right at the very beginning, which is to empty your cup. And there's a lot of people who aren't even black belts who are like, you know, a green belt who think that they know everything already. You know, there's people who walk in day one or white belts think they know everything, you know? And so I think, you know, that experience that you had is actually a really admirable one. And it shows that you had an empty cup and maintained that empty cup all the way up through the upper ranks, which not a lot of people do, but it's something that we're all striving to achieve. I wanted to kind of go back and talk about what I call physical socialization. And it's where, you know, you get a kid and if they don't have physicality in their life ever, they eventually become an adult who's very out of touch with their physical body. And you had mentioned that, you know, when you were an adult and you got into martial arts, you didn't like getting hit. And that's super common. That's like every adult that comes into our program, they like don't like getting hit. And when you look at the kids, some of them like getting hit, some of them don't. Probably more don't like getting hit, but there's a lot more kids who like being hit than adults. And we're talking to a guest on here, and we were talking about grappling. That's something that we do in our program as well. And he was remarking, and I was remarking how we decided we were keeping these things separate, but we recently have decided to blend them into our program because they're very important for self-defense and we want everyone to know them. But we knew that some people don't feel comfortable doing that. So we started with more of the stand-up stuff, the joint manipulations, the throws, and we're working our way to the ground as you go up through the ranks.
Right.
And he was saying how in his program, he's found that the kids, they're pretty good with the grappling. They like it, but the adults, they don't like it so much. And I think all of these things are orbiting this idea that if we don't address the problem early on, it becomes more of an issue later. And so you look at the kids and they don't really have much thought, yay or nay, is getting hit like a bad thing, or is getting thrown a bad thing? Is somebody being on top of me, pinning me down and making me feel useless a bad thing? It's only once they start thinking about it and they realize, ooh, maybe I don't like that. And then they start thinking that for a long, long time, that it becomes hard to go in there and break it up and remold that person. And so I think that's why it's so important to start early, but then also when you're older, realize that maybe that's what's happened. Maybe that's why you don't like sparring. Maybe it's because you just haven't been hit most of your life and not used to someone hitting you in the head and punching you and stuff like that. And so it's going to take a little bit of time.
I can speak to that because I played defense in hockey. I hit people all the time. I put them upside down. I'd run them into the boards. I got creamed. I got knocked out. I mean, all those things happened to me.
Yeah.
But when you're on skates and you're going for a puck and you're trying to break out of a zone or whatever you're doing, right? It's not intimate.
Mm-hmm.
When we're sparring with somebody, it's mano a mano, you versus me, and you're trying to kick me.
Mm-hmm.
That's personal. That's a fight. I mean, it's not, but it feels that way.
Yeah.
So when I'm up there and I'm squared up and I'm doing my thing, and the person in front of me, I'm physically attacking them. Mm-hmm. It is part of the training. It is part of what I am doing. And that's something that people generally as an adult, it's frowned upon in our society. We don't attack people. We don't fight. right? We always de-escalate, and as we should as martial artists, but we still have to train for the worst case scenario, right? So when we're now in that position where we are striking, where we are trying to set up where we can kick somebody to the head or punch them to the body or whatever we're doing, that there's that feeling of intimacy with the person in front of you, where this is personal. This is even if it's not, it just feels that way. And the more you do it, it just becomes another way of training. But at the beginning, it is very personal. And growing up, you don't want to be the kid that got beat up, because they'll always talk about, oh, remember that time when Billy got beat up on the playground by the third grader, and it sticks with you your whole life. And now you don't want to get embarrassed. You don't want to get in the ring with a white belt or an orange belt and as a higher belt thinking, I don't spar, I don't do this. What if they're better than me? And I remember stepping in to a ring against a blue belt as I was a first or second degree, thinking this kid is so freaking good. I'm going to get my butt kicked and I'm going to be embarrassed. And, I managed to figure it out, because at the time I didn't spar, but then I got made to spar. So now it's that all that anxiety goes up even higher, because now I'm going against a lower belt and I'm protecting my rank, right? And it just felt different. It felt different. Now I don't care who I spar. I don't care how old they are. I don't care what rank. It just doesn't matter, because we're just out there having fun. We're working with each other, trying to make each other better. And I think once that thought process shifts to intimate, fearful, embarrassing, hurt, once you get those emotions out of the equation and it becomes a positive, constructive tool to further your training, and you realize everybody in that school is on your team. We're not trying to hurt each other. We're not trying to embarrass anybody. And our job as instructors are not to put people together that one of them's going to walk away from saying, I can't do this, right? We want to build them up every time they step in there and they survive it and they don't get hurt and they touch the hoguk a couple times. They're going to walk away a little more confident, a little more confident, a little more confident. But yeah, you just have to do it. You need to trust your instructors, your masters, that they have your best interest at heart, because we do. The last thing we want to do is put you out there, get embarrassed, get hurt, and quit. It serves no purpose for any of us. But when we do put you out there, we want you to work. We want you to do it because it's important. If it wasn't important, we wouldn't be training it. We wouldn't be wasting your time. So,
yeah, my brother was telling me a book about, I think the title was Uncomfortable with Uncertainty or something like that. And I feel like that's kind of what, I've never even read the book, but that kind of title, be uncomfortable with being uncertain of what's going to happen in a match, and this whole thing reminds me of, if you look at wolf pups, it's very important that they play with each other, and they'll kind of play and bite, and sometimes they'll bite too hard and the wolf pup will go get really angry and have a little tussle, and then they'll calm back down. And then over the course of time, they learn to bite softly, not hard. But then if you get a wolf pup and he gets isolated and he goes through his whole life, and then you try to mess with him, he just only knows hard. He doesn't understand that soft and hard. I had a student come in the other day and the mom was telling me, hey, he's been punching kids at school. And I said, oh, I'm so sorry, I'll have a talk with them. And she's like, no, it's fine. He's been punching kids at school since before he started here. It's just we're trying to work on this. And he's a new student. He's just, been for a few months. And I said, well, I'll sit down and have a talk with them. And I said, now that we're learning martial arts, we have to be careful that we don't hurt people, because what we know how to do can be dangerous. So you can punch people like this, and I did a little play punching. We're just playing, but you can't really punch somebody. And it was like a light bulb, in his mind, that there was two different ways to punch. There was the play punch, and there was the I want to take your life punch, just to be kind of comical about it. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, it's not just this kid, like maybe even the mom herself, maybe a lot of people don't realize there's sort of levels of play. There's ways that we can spar that would be very aggressive and mean. And there's ways that we can spar where it's like, yeah, we're just trying to learn here. And sometimes, I'm sure you've had this experience, the white belt comes in and they're either really scared or they're way too aggressive. You know what I mean? You got to put them down a little bit.
Yep.
And but usually once you start getting up to the black belt ranks, we kind of understand each other. We're like, yeah, we're just practicing. We're just trying to get better. And I have a lot of respect for you, and you have a lot of respect for me. It's not about making each other look bad. But that's something that we don't know when we're white belts and we're just starting out. We're either terrified of the experience or we're out there to prove something and we think we're better than we really are.
Right. No, I agree. I think our expectations when we step in need to be set at a place that's healthy. Perfect example. I'm sure you've gone through this, and this is mostly a girl issue more so than the boys, but I have a few boys that do this as well. They'll kick, but they won't touch. Like they'll get up there and they'll come this far from the hoguk and pull their foot back. Clean shot, they had it. They didn't pull the trigger. They didn't touch the hoguk. And I get it with adults as well. They'll get up there and they'll bounce and they'll throw the kick and they'll kind of throw it up by the head and say, here, I could have got you, but I didn't, kind of thing. And, while I appreciate the idea that they don't want to hurt somebody, you're teaching the person in front of you that whatever they did to not get kicked was enough because you didn't make contact. They tried to move or block or slide or whatever, and they didn't get kicked. So they felt like what they did was correct. When the reality was you chose not to kick them. So you're not helping them. You're teaching them how to a false sense of security, a false sense of ability. And conversely, if you absolutely need to kick somebody, you're teaching yourself how to miss. You're not learning how to control your kick and put it where you want it to go. You're learning how to miss. And if you're not, look, we were talking a little bit beforehand about kicking Bob, right? He's hard. Right? If you're just throwing kicks and not actually making contact, first time you turn over your hip and throw a hard 45 or roundhouse into a hoguk, it hurts. It hurts about the top of your foot. It's like you have not conditioned your foot to absorb that kind of impact. And you're like, whoa, that hurt. So it's how many fold is, we talked about you're teaching yourself how to miss. You're not training your foot and your body to be able to impact something, and you're teaching them that whatever they're doing is good enough when it's really not. So when you're not making impact on sparring, you're hurting everybody, not just yourself, but the person you're up against. And it took me a long time to figure that out because, for me, a lot of people, just getting them in the hoguk and helmet and out on the mats throwing kicks was good enough. But then I watched them and they'd go through ranks and they'd still never hit anybody. They'd still never make contact. And so I started a drill where we put on our hoguks, put our hands on our side and, 5 this side, 5 that side, switch, right? I'm sure you've done the same thing. And always, especially if it's beginners or younger students, I always ask, did everybody live? Yeah. Wasn't that fun? Yeah. Did anybody get hurt? No. And it's like, we did it. Now let's work with each other. Now when you actually kick, I want you to really kick. I want you to kick them. And so it's, and as an adult, same thing. When I'd get up with a kid and I'd be like, oh, halo kick right over the top of the head. I wouldn't make any contact. But I learned that when there's no fear of getting hit or no appreciation or respect for the idea of getting hit, they just ran at you throwing kicks and punches, and they weren't learning anything either, right?
Yeah.
So then you just put your foot up, side kick, cut side right to the chest, and they fall over and they're like, oh, I can't run at Master Dave. That's right. Please don't run at Master Dave. Now I have to be a little more cautious. Now I have to understand, right? So they start trying to, move and they're learning that way.
Yeah.
But if I never put my foot up and hit them in the chest and they ran into it and fell down, they would just be, right? And
Yeah.
you've seen it 100 times, thousands of times, right?
Yeah.
So you have to make, even as an instructor, even as a black belt, even as an adult, a kid, a parent, it doesn't matter. You have to train appropriately. And
Absolutely.
sometimes that's hard. Sometimes you don't want to do that. And sometimes the person in front of you is so stressed that you see the tears and they're just, right. But then at the end of it, if you do your job right, at the end of it, they're not crying, they're breathing. You might even see a smile. You'll see that I survived it. It was just one more success in their story. One more opportunity to show that they can do this. And they're the parents. I've had parents come up and say, I did not think they were going to do that, but look at them. They did a great job. I said, yeah, they did a great job. They just have to believe in themselves, and boom, there you go.
Yeah.
So,
That's really admirable. And I think that's an issue that a lot of master instructors have to deal with. And some people, I feel like rise to a challenge like you, or like, okay, well, we have to do this. But again, I try to figure out how to do this in the best, most constructive way possible. And then other masters I find, and no shade cast on them, they're great instructors and I love everything they taught me and stuff like that. But some masters sometimes just try to get away from it all and say, well, we just don't do sparring anymore because it's too much trauma associated with it, and we don't want to deal with that. The kids don't like it, and they start kind of giving up on the kids. And I think that's what it is. Like, I'm not going to give up on my students. I know that they can do it. I know they can achieve it, and I'm going to find a way to make it approachable enough that they can get to that basic level to start loving it.
well, a funny story about that. So when I competed, I only sparred because I wanted to spar. That's what I enjoyed, right? So we were at a tournament and I had this little high green belt, I think, maybe purple belt. And I'm sitting here and it's Pumse time. And he's up there walking through doing, pardon the French, crappy, right? Just not even trying. He wants to spar.
Yeah.
And I pulled him to the side. I said, Seth, what are you doing? He's like, what do you mean? I said, you finished dead last, dude. You didn't even try. I tried. And like, Pumse is important. You need to do Pumse.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at me dead straight in the eyes and say, but Master Dave, you don't compete in forms. I'm like, you're right. I'll tell you what, I'm going to go compete because black belts hadn't competed. I said, I'm going to put myself in Pumse, and not only am I going to do it, I'm going to win today. And he's like, good. I said, yeah. And I said, when was the last time you saw me do my form? I don't know that I've seen you other than demos. I said, yeah. So I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do forms. And so I went out and yeah, I won. I took second to grand champion. And I'm like, I came back to him. I said, dude, I did it. That kid worked Pumse so hard for the next 3-4 months so that he could do it. And as instructors and masters, our students look to us for motivation, for guidance. And I'm not saying all school owners should be putting themselves in tournaments and competing against their fellow school owners or black belts or whatever. I'm not saying that in any way, shape, or form, but practice what you preach. It took a 8-year-old kid staring me in the eye saying, but you don't do that. And at first I was mad, like, really? I'm Master Dave. Why are you telling me this? You can't talk to me like that. And then it dawned on me, he was 100% correct. He called me out and he was right. And I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. I'm going to do this. And I competed in forms every single tournament from there on out. Of course, I also got back in the dojo and started practicing my forms a little bit more. So that was a positive too. But yeah, I mean, it took him calling me out. So if back to your example of the school owner, it's like, yeah, we don't, the liability, and all that stuff just exudes out their pores to their students. And it's like sparring, and while he will never say sparring is a scary thing, if you're not doing it and you're not addressing it and you're not applying that technique to your curriculum, the kids and students wonder why. Because maybe it is scary, maybe it is dangerous, maybe it is this or that. And I told you at the beginning, if you come in sparring week curriculum as a white belt, and that's your first class, that's what you're doing that day. And, you know, I'll tell parents, I'll say, look, we're in sparring week this week. If you want to put your trial class the next week where we're doing basics or forms or whatever we're doing that week, feel free. But I think it's a good idea to get that out of the way right away. And, you know, if they don't love it, then we say, why don't you come back next week? And we'll try something totally different. And then they get on that, oh yeah, this is fun. Or they love it. And it doesn't matter what you do after that. They're hooked on whatever it is that you're teaching them.
Yeah.
Do you remember and then again, you guys are young, so you started young. I remember my first class. I mean, I remember it like it was yesterday, and it was 25 years ago. And I remember stepping on the mat, and it was so funny because our master instructor, when he key-upped, he'd use different key-ups. And so we'd be key-upping and doing our kicks and whatever, just doing all these crazy things. And every time he made that sound, I tried to mimic what sound he was making. And so I didn't have my own key-up. I was like, he said, "Aya!" I'm like, "Aya!" It's like, you know, whatever it was, I was trying to do what he was doing because I thought that's what I had to do. And it was so funny because after class he came up, he says, your key up is your own. Don't do what I do. Your key up is your own. And I'm like, point taken, sorry. You know, so it was just so funny. I mean, I remember that like it was yesterday.
Awesome.
But yeah, you if you are engaged and you're involved and you start this journey with, as you said, an empty cup, you are going to have the most amazing experience you could possibly have, because you are going into it with the right mindset, the right focus. You may not have the right body type. You may not have the right flexibility ability. You may not have the most time in the world, and one class a week is the best you're going to get because of your work schedule, your family schedule, whatever. But I guarantee you, any time you spend on that mat is time well spent. And if you can spend it with your kids, even better. I mean, that is so amazing, that just that whole experience. I know we talked about it earlier, but just that experience with your kid and getting out of your own head and your own life and just stepping out, being a student, being an open, empty cup, you know, just absorbing everything you can. You're not going to agree with everything your instructor says. Some of the stuff you're going to say, oh, that's kind of hokey, you know, and it'll happen. But you know, it's funny, the hokey stuff at the beginning that you hear your instructors and masters talking about, as you get down that line, it's not so hokey. It's real. And the courtesy, the respect, the discipline, all that stuff, they're not buzzwords for ad campaigns. You talk to anybody who is a lifelong or a successful martial artist who's stuck with it for 5+ years, you will find the same thing from them. They will tell you that it changed everything. It made all the difference. How they see life, how they see their family, how they see their kids, how they train, how they see their job. You know, it's funny because we talked earlier, we didn't really get to it yet, and I don't know if we have time or not, but starting my school was not even on my radar. At the time I was a 2nd degree black belt, and it was not on my radar. I had a successful business, and I'm like, no, I don't need this, you know. And my master said, and then something happened in my world where people were going to online meetings, and this is back at the recession back in 2010-11, and I was a meeting planner, and we just weren't as busy as we were. And my master instructor looked at me and says, why don't you open a school? kidding. Nah, I can't do that. I can't out school on a second degree. I'm not even a master. And, I'm like, but it was there. He said it, and now it's there, and it's like driving into my head, and it just like, so then he calls me. He says, hey, Don Oli wants, not you, Odd Oli is his name. He has a MMA school. He wants somebody to come in and teach striking. Would you be interested? And I'm like, check, yeah, that sounds like fun. I figure a couple times a week, not a big deal. So I go and I meet with him, and he's like, yeah, do you want to teach? I said, sure, I'd love to. And so we're in there, and he has this whole big room that has nothing in it. And I said, what are you doing over there? And he's like, oh, we were going to do something with it, and we just didn't yet. I said, can I teach some Taekwondo over there too? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I'm ready to take over that space. And then his wife comes in and sees me painting that area and cleaning it up and making it usable. Now all of a sudden she wants to put a dance school in there too. I'm like, okay, how's it going to work on times? And she's like, oh, no problem. We'll make it work. We'll make it work. But she wanted from like 5 to 7 every day. She wanted to put one of those thin dance mats down. She didn't want mats. She wanted to paint it this baby puke green and put these flowers on the wall. And I'm like, not really the martial arts school I was hoping for. But the space right next to it was a storage for a consignment shop that they really weren't using much. It was dirty and gross and all that. And I was in there, and I told John, I said, John, look, I don't mind teaching striking in the gym, but I can't do a Taekwondo school here. I love your wife. She's super nice, but I can't run a business that way. He's like, well, talk to the landlord about the other space. We'll just be, you can come over and teach here and then run your classes over there, and it'll all work out. I went in, we talked to the landlord. They're going to give us 8 months free rent, and it gives me time to build it out and do it. And our first school was like 1,000 square feet maybe. And every year we knocked down a wall and moved. John's school closed because he couldn't keep it going. We took over some of his space. We moved out into the hall. Pretty soon we're at 4,000 square feet. And it was not part of my life. It was not something I had planned on. But it was funny because, as you get a little older, you start thinking about legacy and things like that. And my wife and I were talking one day about whether we were going to open or not. And she looked at me and says, what do you want to do? And I said, for 25 years, I was a meeting planner. For 25 years, I helped companies increase their bottom line. And for 25 years, I had zero impact on the world. Zero. Money's not an impact. I said, opening this school gives me a chance to be remembered. It gives me this opportunity to share all this great information that made such a difference in my life with somebody else. And if I affect one student, my whole life has changed because I've made a difference. The world is a better place because I was in it. And, that's kind of the magic of martial arts to me. To me.
Yes, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I would never trade this job for anything in the world. No. And to anybody out there who's older and looking at martial arts thinking, oh, I've got a bad knee, I've got a bad shoulder, my back hurts. I've had 4 knee surgeries. I'm about to get my hip replaced. I tore my shoulder up, and none of it was, one knee was from martial arts. The rest was just using my body the way I wanted to use it and having fun with it. I'm still teaching. I'm still doing martial arts. I'm still out on the mats. I'm still kicking. I'm still punching, and I love it. There is no ailment that you have that Master Olds can't overcome. I mean, you modify your curriculum based on injury and body type, right? Mm-hmm. You have things that I have 3 70-year-old ladies train here. 3. Wow. One of them just started as a white belt 5 months ago. Okay.
Another one's a second degree who has been with us since she was 60, a 60-year-old Indian lady. You want to talk about a barrier to entry? Indian women don't do sports. Indian women don't go outside their house and do things with other people away from their husbands. And this woman, she eats, breathes, and sleeps Taekwondo. Her home, she has a whole wall in her house. This is amazing. She has every board she ever broke stacked up.
Oh,
She has a quilt that one of her friends made that has Taekwondo in Korean across it. It's got the tenets of Taekwondo on it. It's got all the names of the forms. It's just a beautiful, beautiful quilt. And then she's got her belt rack, and she's got all of her certificates on the side, and she calls it her shrine. And she looks at it every day and thinks, how on earth did I accomplish this? This is the best thing I've ever done in my life. I mean, I kid you not, it is so cool. A 70-year-old woman in here reaching second degree and starting in her 60s. I mean, that's so cool.
I'll tell you why you have these awesome 7-year-old ladies and why you have this 4,000 square foot school, even though you started with a friend and it seems like his school didn't make it. And it's because you have so much passion. I mean, I can just feel it sort of radiating off you. You have so much charisma, so much passion. I would love to train under you if I was a student there at your academy. So, it's been a pleasure having you on. We could probably talk for like 3 more hours. I have like a million questions I wanted to get to. I never even got to them. So we'll probably have to have you back on and talk about something else in the future.
I would love to
have us. But for the sake of our viewers, I think we should probably wrap it up for now. But it's been a true honor to have you on the show. Jesse, any final thoughts? You're kind of quiet today.
I have. So Master Popper, I mean, it really was great. I was kind of sitting back and listening today. There were a few moments where I said, oh, I could hop in, but I have just really enjoyed hearing so much about your story and what you're doing there at your school.
Thank you, guys. I'm kind of new to the podcast. I had done some TV spots for one of our local channels, but it was like a 3-minute thing, so it was like super easy to do. So this is kind of a new thing for me, but I really enjoyed it. And anytime you guys want to have me back on, I'd love to sit and chat about martial arts. Like you said, I could do another 3 hours like that. So
yes, sir.
Likewise. Well, have a great day. Best of luck with your school. We'll see you next time.
thank you, sir.
Sir.
If you enjoyed that podcast, please consider liking and subscribing to our YouTube channel, as well as hitting the notification bell. We offer in-person, group, and private lessons at our facility in Kyle, Texas, as well as virtual lessons anywhere in the world. If you'd like to learn more about our programs, you can find us online at risingphoenixtkd.com.